Hi guys, so this week we are talking about 1-point perspective again, but we're taking it one step further and we're creating a cityscape using 1-point perspective instead of just three-dimensional shapes. So just like last week, if you remember, I've drawn on my piece of paper my horizon line, which is the horizontal line that divides our sky from our ground in a landscape. And you'll notice that my horizon line isn't in the dead center of my paper. It's actually a little bit above. So you can choose where you want your horizon line, but I would leave plenty of space up above and below it, but you can kind of move it throughout this area a little bit. And then, of course, our vanishing point, the point where everything gets so small back in space that we can no longer see it anymore, is in the middle of my horizon line back here, okay? So the next step that you will need to do for this project after you draw your horizon line and your vanishing point, which I've done in red pen just so you guys can see them, see where all my points are going back to. But of course, I would recommend you doing it in pencil and drawing really lightly because you're going to want to erase out this line and, or not the horizon line, you probably want to leave that, but through your buildings, you'll want to erase this line and then your vanishing point as well. Our next step after you've drawn your horizon line and your vanishing point is to take a ruler or something with a flat edge, which is always important for this project, and you're going to connect each corner, each of the four corners of your paper, back to your vanishing point in the center. So I've done mine in blue so that you can see them again. I've connected all four of my corners back to the vanishing point. And mine doesn't make a perfect X shape because my horizon line is a little bit higher and it's not in the very center of my paper. If your horizon line and vanishing point are in the very center of your paper, your diagonal lines should make a perfect X across your paper. We also sometimes call these diagonal lines orthogonal lines, which is kind of a hard word to say. But if you hear me using that term, that's what I'm talking about, these orthogonal diagonal lines. Okay, so for our cityscape, you're obviously going to want to include buildings in this. So that's where our diagonal orthogonal lines are going to help us out because they help guide our buildings back to our vanishing point. But you're going to have to do a little bit more line work yourself. So the first thing that I did to build up this side is I drew some vertical straight up and down lines that I wanted the size of my buildings to be. So the closer they are together, the smaller your building's going to be. And ideally, your building should get a little bit smaller as they go back in space. As with anything, you can see I drew some trees right here on this side. And you'll notice that my trees are decreasing in size as they go back towards my vanishing point. Your buildings do that as well. So you might have a really wide building up here close to the edge of your paper. And then your lines, your vertical lines get a little closer together as you go back in space. So if I was going to draw like a tiny little building back here, I would maybe make it about this big, okay? And you can use these diagonal lines that you drew for yourself to make the tops of your buildings. If you want to make it a little bit easier for yourself, you can just take that straight across and say, that's going to be the top of all my buildings. I like my buildings to be all different heights. I think it makes my city look a little bit interesting. So you'll see here is the top of one of my buildings, here is the top of one of my buildings, and then here is the top of one of my buildings. And I just, after I drew my vertical lines, I went and I made sure that my ruler was touching that vanishing point. And then I'm just going to, and I'm actually going to make this building a little bit taller so I have some room for myself. I'm connecting this outside line with my vanishing point in the middle, and I'm drawing a straight line across the top of my building. So the tops of my buildings are not straight across like this. They are all going back to that vanishing point. Now that is usually pretty easy for my students. What's a little bit more challenging is making sure that anything that you add on top of your buildings is going in the correct direction as well. So I did a little demonstration here of what a lot of my students tend to do when they draw a building. They draw their building perfectly in 1-point perspective. You can see the top and the bottom are all going back to their vanishing point, and then they go in and they draw flat squares for the windows and the doors. And you can see that that looks a little bit funny to our eye. It looks like we cut out some pieces of paper and like glued them onto a building. You'll notice the difference here is that when I was creating my windows, the bottom of my windows and the top of my windows and doors all connect back to my vanishing point here. And that's how we make sure that everything that we're adding on top of our building is also looking three-dimensional and like it matches the building itself. So when you're getting ready to draw some windows and doors, it's really easy to draw straight lines all the way down your building first. So decide how far apart you want your windows to be and draw those straight lines down. And then of course the lines that come back across to form the window will connect to your vanishing point like this. And then I'm just twisting, making sure that it's always touching that vanishing point. And I'm gonna connect there as well, okay? What I did to make this little doorway look three-dimensional and like it's kind of pushed back into the building, this is a little bit tricky. I picked a spot in the top of my door that's not dead center. It's a little bit further to one side or the other. And I drew a straight up and down line. Then I drew a horizontal line that touched that. So I made a straight little box for myself. You can see right there. And then I just connected this corner back to my vanishing point and drew a straight line going this direction. And that makes it look like you could almost take a little step into the building. So I think that's a fun little detail if you want to push this a step further. You can also go a little bit further and start adding in, like, to make the windows look three-dimensional, pick a side. Probably the side that's facing the middle. And you're just going to give yourself a little bar across all of the windows so that makes them look like they're three-dimensional too. So let's draw a couple of windows on this side of the street together. So I'm going to draw one line right here. Maybe I want my window about that big. So I drew two vertical lines. And then I'm just going to use my vanishing point to connect the top. So there's the top of my window. I'm holding my ruler on my vanishing point. And there's the bottom of my window. So every single door and window, the sides are perfectly vertical, straight up and down. And then the top and the bottom always go back to that vanishing point. We can't wait to see how you apply 1-point perspective to make a cityscape and what you decide to fill it with. You can be really creative about what kind of businesses you want in your city. If you want your city to be like a future city and have like aliens coming down or something crazy, you can really be creative with how you make your city look. So what are you going to include to make it your own? We can't wait to see. Bye.